What's up, metal and heavy music fans? It's Flight of Icarus again with MetalTrenches.com. As always, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to the channel and like the video if you enjoy it. So, as some of you may know, fellow writer Chris and I sat down for 2 episodes of the podcast already to run down our favorite releases from the first half and second half of this year. But now I kind of want to just condense it down now that the dust has settled a little bit and really just list out my top 10 overall favorite albums from 2019. And while it was really difficult to narrow it down, as always in terms of enjoyability, musicianship, innovation, I've had my time to rank them in terms of those categories, but now is the time of the year that I really reflect back on which albums do I remember the most? Which ones stuck with me? Which ones did I really have a hard time putting down? And so those are the types of albums you can expect to hear about right now.
I have a bone to pick with death. He still follows me around.
So starting with number 10, I had a really hard time with this one because there were a lot of other heavy releases that I considered covering. We're talking Carnifex, Infant Annihilator, Shadow of Intent. And while I absolutely adored all of those releases, when it came down to it, there was a completely different type of heavy album that just stuck with me the most. This is one of those albums that I really remembered so many different little moments from and really had a hard time putting down. And that was Knocked Loose, A Different Shade of Blue. This album is just fucking megaton bomb heavy. So many great call-out lines, excellent breakdowns. It kind of reminds me of the same impact I had listening to Code Orange's Forever for the first time, and I'm still spinning this thing just absolutely nonstop. It's probably kind of the most quote-unquote basic, least technical album on this list, but that doesn't stop it from being just an absolute crusher, and for that reason, I just feel like it has to be included at number 10. All right, number 9, going for a bit of an underground pick here, but one that definitely caught my attention, and I had these guys on a very early episode of the podcast. But in any case, it's Colorado's Noctambulist with their debut album, Atmospheres of Desolation. If you're an Ulcerate fan, you absolutely need to pick this up. As we discussed it on that episode of the podcast, they're big fans of Ulcerate 2, definitely a heavy influence on their sound, very similar approach to just really dense atmosphere, really weird winding technical guitars, overpowering death vocals. It's a type of album that just absolutely fills you with this utter sense of desolation and despair. And so, fantastic release, great guys. I can't wait to hear what they cook up in the future. All right, number 8. This one's been a long time coming. As many of you probably know, I was a big fan of Lord Mantis's Death Mask, and they finally followed it up with their new full-length Universal Death Church. They did not disappoint. They absolutely lived up to the hype. Really stoked to see them reunite. Excellent to have Charlie Fell back on the vocals, because he continues to just be one of the most animalistic figures in the game when it comes to that respect. A lot of droning, sludgy, kind of repetitious hooks, but utilized very effectively. It's very hypnotic. It just makes you feel dirty. And I really just can't get enough of, again, the vocal performance in particular in all of its hacking, regurgitating glory. All right, number 7, we've got a more recent album. It is Wilderun with Veil of Imagination. This is a progressive death metal band with plenty of folk influences as well. And I gotta say, like, these guys really stepped up their game. I talked about it in my full review. They took everything that was already amazing about some of their earlier releases, but really tightened things up, just hone their craft and come together with a really powerful, progressive masterpiece. Like, it's absolutely good enough to be called that. And this is one of those albums where it actually is fair to use that overused word, epic. All right, number 6, we've got the controversial pick here. It's Deathspell Omega's The Furnaces of Palingenesia. This was an album that I actually did not even include on my first half of the year list. I had a lot of just different thoughts about it, but I gotta give it credit where it's due. It just lingered with me. Something about it just kept me coming back. It's probably one of my most revisited albums of the year where, yes, I would put it down, but it would just seep under my skin and I'd be thinking about it and I'd put it back on and I'd put it away and then it would come back to me and it's just it haunts you. It's just this lurking, imposing figure. And on top of that, I feel like the discussion around the album and the controversy is just such a perfect microcosm of kind of where we're at from a socio-political viewpoint right now. It definitely captures some of the zeitgeist that's going on. All right, moving along to number 5, we've got symphonic death metal band Fleshgod Apocalypse with their new album Veleno. I think this is their best album. I really do. I've been following these guys for a little while now. I've really enjoyed their sound. I've always had concerns, though, about sometimes it being kind of overly dense. It's hard to sort of pick out everything that's going on, and it's just the production can be really just berating. But in this case, I feel like they took all my favorite elements from their faster approach from some of their earlier albums. They mixed that up with the improved dynamics and production of King, and just came together with just an absolutely stellar album. And all of that while having a massive overturn of the lineup. I mean, considering just what a change it would have been easy for the band to completely fall apart. But save for a few little vocal improvements that could happen next time around, I really do feel like this is the band's grand statement so far. All right, number 4, giving Post-Black a little love with Numenorean's Adore. Excellent stuff, totally melodic, blew me away. Such a step forwards from the previous album. I know a lot of people were really raving about that one, but for me it was certain songs I enjoyed, but as an album it was kind of yeah, it's fine. I enjoy it. This one totally overhauled everything. They brought back everything I loved about the first album, but also really stepped up the songwriting, stepped up the production. Lots more progressive elements this time around. I hear a lot of Gojira in certain areas, and it comes together for just this beautiful catharsis. And there's something so emotional about it, but also impressively technical, and it really just checks off all the boxes. All right, number 3 should be no surprise for anyone who knows me at all and has been following the channel, and that is Periphery 4, Hail Stan. I'm a big Periphery fan. I've done multiple videos on them. I've been listening to them ever since I heard Icarus Lives on the radio, but you can check out all those other videos to hear me rant on and on and on about that, and probably more so in the future. But this album, this is another one where I think this is their crowning achievement. They've improved every single album, and this is just a culmination of that. It's a ballsy move to be kind of like a poppier, sort of more mainstream, so to speak, band and open your album with a 17-minute progressive opus. But that's exactly what they did, and Reptile is a damn fine song. But then everything on here is just incredible. You got the heavier tracks for just the straight headbanging crowd like Blood Eagle and Church Burner. But then you've got weird experimental stuff like Crush, and then also really radio-friendly kind of Coheed-esque stuff like It's Only Smiles. And it all works, it all comes together somehow into a cohesive experience. And I just continue to be thrilled to see what this band cooks up album after album.
Could it be any more obvious? Singing and wounds, stretching and sighs.
All right, these last two are kind of tied, but they're so different it's hard to rank them. But ultimately, I'm going to give the number 2 spots to the Callous Daoboys for Die on Mars. This is the best mathcore album you will hear this year. I'd argue it's potentially in the top 10 mathcore albums of the decade. And that is a tall order, but god damn it, I feel like they earned it. Start to finish, every single song on here is a masterpiece of just hilarity and heaviness, and from the skits to the guitar to the weird implementation of violin to even what I'm seeing just from their social media presence. And I had Carson on the podcast, and he's an absolute character. This is just like a whole package. This band is like destined for greatness if they just reach out and grab it and put the work in. And this album is an absolute testament to that. I can't tell you just over and over again how excited I am for them and their future, and how interested I am to hear where their sound goes next. But you absolutely need to get this album. If you like the Dillinger Escape Plan, Norma Jean, The Chariot, Every Time I Die, the number 12 Looks Like You, if you're a fan of any of those bands, then you absolutely have to have this album. No question. And finally, last but not least, I've been talking everyone's ear off about this album, did 2 podcasts talking to the band, and then probably brought it up on pretty much every podcast since then, and that is Warforged Voice. This one's especially notable for me because it's one of my most hyped albums from like the past 5 years. I've been following this band about as long as I've been running the site, and they had only been putting out kind of a single here, a little short EP there, but it was always enough to just keep me enticed and be really interested to keep following them. And so this is something that, again, is like half a decade in the making for me, and especially for the band. They spent a long time writing this album, performing this album, recording it. They put together a full-length music video for the entire album that you can watch on YouTube. And you can just feel the passion coming through on absolutely every element on every level. It's just so genuine. And it is one of the finest progressive death metal albums that you're going to hear from the past several years. It's definitely my favorite of the year. And I feel like that's a tall order because there's been a lot of really great progressive death metal this year. A lot of great releases, especially on their label, The Artisan Era, in similar style. But this one is just... it's the best. It's easily the best. And at like 1 hour and 15 minutes too, you know me, I'm the guy who constantly complains about people making albums that are way longer than they need to be. This is not one of those albums. This album perfectly justifies its length. There's so many twists and turns, and I am just in awe of it. And that'll do it. Those are my 10 favorite albums from 2019. But again, if you want to hear even more, because it's hard to narrow it down to just 10. They're all kind of like your babies. And so if you haven't already, listened to those 2 episodes of the podcast. But I think that'll about cover it. As always, again, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to this channel. Like the video if you enjoyed it. Leave a comment. I want to hear what your favorite releases are. Where do you agree? Where do you disagree? What did we miss? What can't you wait for in 2020? And then also check in the description, you can find links to all of our social media, the mailing list, and also our Patreon and Subscribe Star. If you donate just $1 a month, if you're a regular viewer and you feel like we're worth that added value, then that would make a huge difference. But that'll do it for this video. Flight of Icarus, signing off. I will see you in the trenches.